Finger licking good.
What's all this smoke? Am I doing a vampire movie again? Near Dark may well be one of the greatest vampire movies that I have ever seen, which makes the fact that it flopped really hard on release even more surprising. On the surface, part western, part gory vampire horror, part romance, but really it's a character study on the dysfunctionality of family. It also has a stellar ensemble cast, and it's no surprise it has gone on to become somewhat of a cult hit over the years. The plot is a clever subversion of the usual vampire trope by basically asking the question, what is it really like to be a vampire? With the apparent answer being, it sucks. Our audience stand-in and the protagonist who introduces us to this world is Caleb Colton, played by Adrian Pastor, a young man from small town America who meets a female drifter named May, who is Jenny Wright. She is of course a vampire, a word that's not actually said throughout any of the film's 95-minute runtime, which is fairly unusual for a vampire flick in of itself. She turns Caleb and introduces him to her family, who are the most dysfunctional family imaginable. You have Lance Henriksen as Jesse Hooker, who is the leader and oldest vampire, being at least 150 years old at the time of the film. He's basically a sadistic psychopath who fought for the South in the US Civil War. Jeanette Goldstein is his girlfriend Diamondback, and is the one character in this film who has the least character of any of them, beyond being Jesse's girl. Homer, a character who has the appearance of a small boy of about 10 years of age, presumably the age when he was turned, and he hasn't physically aged since, is an old man stuck in a child's body, and as a result is a semi-tragic character, even though he is also a murderous psychopath. The last of this vampire family is Bill Paxton's character, Severin, who is just a little bit younger than Jesse, as he intimates early on in the film that they were in fact the cause of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. He's also the most sadistic and psychopathic of them all, seemingly taking great pleasure in killing people. Henriksen, Paxton and Goldstein had all actually previously appeared in James Cameron's film Aliens together, and it was at his suggestion that Bigelow, his future wife, cast them. Michael Biehn was offered a role but turned the opportunity down as he apparently didn't like the script and found it confusing. Initially, the family want to murder Caleb, but once they discover he's one of them, they agree he has 7 days to prove himself capable of being a vampire. It is this that is the real meat of the plot, with Caleb having to learn to be the undead, and failing miserably at every turn. We also discover being a vampire is a pretty miserable existence, one where you live in stolen vans and have to drive from town to town, constantly being in fear of two things, being discovered and the sun, all whilst murdering people. Initially, Kathryn Bigelow, the co-writer and director, wanted to make a western that departed from the tropes of that genre, but realised that westerns were essentially a dead genre at the time, with almost no public interest, and studios therefore unwilling to finance such a film. With the resurgence of vampire flicks being made once again popular by such films as Fright Night and The Lost Boys in the mid to late 80s, with this coming out in 1987, it was decided to combine the western genre with vampires. The mixing of the western genre and vampirism really melds well together, as the scorched earth and bright sun that are the usual settings for westerns become even more deadly to our cast of characters. This is never more evident than in the shootout scene, where suddenly the threat of bullets is secondary to bursting into flames due to the bullet holes they create, allowing the real danger of the sun in. Not only does it look cool, it also really elevates what could have been a fairly mundane shootout, what with vampires being impervious to bullets and all. The other major action scene of note in the bar is, however, probably the high point of the film, where the vamps murder a whole bunch of people in an attempt to try and teach Caleb their ways. In fact, we get a whole lot of murdering in this, and as a result we get a massive amount of really great gore, especially Paxton losing half of his face, not once but twice, The film doesn't hold back on that front. But this film isn't great because of the gore, that's merely a bonus. It's great because it's really at heart a character study on family. On the surface, this is a group of murderous nutcases, but deep down, really deep down, they are a genuine, if entirely dysfunctional family of sorts, who genuinely care about each other and look out for one another. This element is really helped by the fact the cast are fantastic, with Paxton and Henriksen especially being particularly great in their roles. The film also has a really moody vibe and look due to the use of lighting and a whole lot of smoke-filled scenes that, if nothing else, look great. Oh, and if all that wasn't enough, we get another excellent Tangerine Dream soundtrack, their 10th for a movie and 32nd album overall. I do have one major criticism, however, that being that the ending is, in my opinion, bad. It's such a cop-out. Throughout the film, Caleb's dad, played by Tim Thomerson, and sister are tracking him down, and in the end they find him only for Homer to become instantly infatuated with Caleb's sister, wanting to turn her into a vampire as a companion for himself, as he's basically a tragically lonely old man trapped in a small boy's body. This sets off a chain of events that means the vampires are one by one killed off. Firstly, Severin, who explodes when this truck inexplicably just blows up for no apparent reason at all. It literally just blows up. Then Homer, who sets on fire, then explodes due to exposure to the sun, and I have to say the fire effects on Homer are quite terrible. I know you can't go around setting child actors on fire for real, but they should have filmed it in a way that they could have set fire to a stunt double somehow. It's a real shame because up until that point, the effects in this are top notch. Then Jesse and Diamondback also explode due to exposure to the sun, leaving Caleb and May alive. Now, Caleb has already been cured of his vampirism by receiving a blood transfusion, which is a cop-out. But one I can buy, as he never really wanted to be a vampire, and he never killed anyone, making a choice not to multiple times throughout the narrative. But to then save May and have Caleb and her presumably live happily ever after together as a couple is a really massive cop-out that I just can't really get behind, because we see her murder multiple people during this film alone. Okay, she doesn't seemingly take sadistic pleasure in it like Severin and Jesse do, but still, she herself says you have to kill nightly to survive, so she's potentially the world's most prolific serial killer who has possibly murdered thousands of people depending on how long she has been a vampire. And yet, we as an audience are asked right at the very end to accept her being saved, even though we just spent the last 90 minutes being told there was a choice to not be a sadistic killer, a choice Caleb took and she clearly didn't. It's a one dark stain on what is otherwise an excellent film in my opinion. So that was Near Dark, a clever twist on not one but two genres, and a film that I highly recommend if you like either or just for Bill Paxton, because he's worth the price of entry alone. If you enjoyed that, then like, comment and subscribe, because next week I'll be continuing my series of Blackadder retrospectives with Blackadder the Third.